It's about doing things in the best interests of this country, surely. And one has to be diplomatic because this is the real world. Erol Morkoç, spokesperson for Republicans overseas. Welcome back, Erol. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
What should he say? What should he say to President Trump, our Prime
Well,
Minister?
he's got to double down on the concepts of things like the special relationships, sort of the intangibles that people like Trump actually believe in, shared values, historical alliances, and I think the easiest way to do that is through demonstrating the U.S. or the UK's dedication to sharing the security burden, which Starmer has done. He has pledged to increase defense spending to the 2.5% of GDP by 2027. That's what Trump is looking for, and if you want to have an all inclusive, or maybe not all inclusive, but inclusive peace process, you definitely want to make the Americans aware that, hey, not only is Europe going to be doing their part, but the UK as well is going to do their part, and it's in the U.S. interest to make sure it's a multilateral discussion. Now, I think Trump was right to go in there and have a one-to-one between the Russians and the Americans. I think that makes sense, but that isn't probably where we want to take this full time. So if I was Keir Starmer, I would definitely be focusing on enhancing and emphasizing the allyship that Donald Trump is looking for. I mean, again, I think we have very common values, and it's just as you said in your intro about diplomacy, and that's on all aspects for the Americans as well. Marco Rubio, for example, has been going around the world stressing that this is a new world order. I mean, this is a multipolar world order where America is not this indispensable nation that at all costs can be world's police, and that means a stronger Europe and a stronger UK. And I think long term, these are things that benefit not only ourselves, but your own independence and your own continental independence, if you want to take it that way, at least from a defense perspective. So this might be a catalyst for change. And I think it would be a great opportunity for Keir Starmer to extend a hand of friendship, because Donald Trump is, after all, an Anglophile in his own right and somebody who wants to be your friend. So let's see if you can do it.
A Scottish American, many people would say as
Yeah,
well, given
yes, yes.
his mother. What are those shared values you talk of?
Well, the shared values have always been built around the concepts of freedom, whether that be freedom of trade or fighting
Well,
for
freedom of trade,
social.
like with no tariffs, you mean?
Yeah, it depends on how you look at it. Like
Uh-huh.
for example, if you look at the imbalance of trade, right? That's where you get to a different discussion. We have a huge imbalance with Europe and the UK in goods, but we have a surplus in services, right? So it gives an interesting situation. But free trade at the expense of your own working class has never been anybody's goal, and that's why, for example, Canada has a 215% tariff on dairy, because American dairy producers would come in and crush the Canadian dairy industry. So they have to protect their workers, just as many countries have done with trade. So America actually coming in protecting some of its workers with the threat of tariffs at least brings that to the table. I think our shared values go to the fact that in the great times of darkness in world history in the last century or two, we've stood side by side and we've fought against that. Now you see things like J.D. Vance. He comes over and he says, in general to Europe, but UK included, hey, it seems like our values diverge when it comes to unfettered free speech. We see certain events that don't match with our values, and that's fine. We don't have to have the same laws on the books, but that would be an example of perhaps how that's been fracturing slightly. But that doesn't overwhelm the fact that our soldiers have fought arm in arm all around the world for
Will
the
they still
shared
be
common.
fighting arm in
Well,
arm?
the goal is that they wouldn't be, right. That we wouldn't be in
If
wars.
necessary?
Like, if necessary, of course. But is it necessary to go to, like, for example, escalate the situation in Ukraine? Absolutely not. You have 71,000 soldiers maybe in your military. How many do you want to send to die in Russia? Because here's a fact for your viewers.
Who escalated the
There's
situation in the first place?
Yeah, no, but think about this for a second. There's about $20 trillion of resources, rare earths and whatnot, in the East, where Vladimir Putin has already taken the land. He spent 500,000 lives to do that. That's $40 million per head. So you're dealing with a cold, calculated, malignant, narcissistic sociopath who's willing to like have his own people thrown into a meat grinder. Our leaders, hopefully, wouldn't treat our fellow citizens, who would be our soldiers, in the same callous way. So if you're going to go to war with somebody who number one has that kind of incentive, I don't think people realize that incentive and how valuable it is, because those numbers are pretty big when you think about it. The values have to be realistic, and they have to also understand the U.S. has been in a perpetual state of war for my entire life. And a lot of people are pretty much over it. And the idea that we're going to start another one in Eastern Europe is pretty ridiculous when we can have a peace process and we can sort of bring an end to it. Keep in mind, we just lost a war to the Taliban. We just spent 20 years. My friend got his foot blown off, and for what? We just lost a war to the Taliban. So I mean, take Vietnam. When we left Vietnam, or let's even better example, Eisenhower in '53. We never signed a peace deal with the North Koreans, and by default, their proxy, the Chinese, or they were the proxy of the Chinese. There's an armistice still to this day. But what do you have? You have South Korea. And go ask your average South Korean right now what they would rather have: South Korea, or never have signed that armistice and never have brought peace. So you have to look at the reality of it and realpolitik or whatever you want, but you need to find some sort of common ground. Russia has a hypersonic missile they can put in your bedroom in about 3 to 4 minutes. That's a real thing. They have fifth generation stealth fighters. They're bullies, and they went and they did this horrific thing, and now we have to deal with it because the last regime was apparently okay with saying phrases like, "We're going to gum up the Russian war machine with bodies." Okay, well, now here we go. Fast forward 3 years later, they got what they wanted. There's a million dead people, and nothing. So let's
What about
find
Gaza,
some new
just finally?
solution.
Oh, we've got Lee Turner, former UK ambassador to Kiev, author of Lessons in Diplomacy. Well, we could do with a few of those. Lessons in Diplomacy, Politics, Power and Parties. With you in a second, Lee. Thank you. What about Gaza? This video just came out, which President Trump, I think, re-trumped or retweeted or re-truth socialed or whatever. And it's a sort of vision of Gaza. There's a song with the lyrics, "Donald is coming to set you free," and it's all gold. It's like the Trump Tower. It's all gold and garish, shining bright and golden future and brand new life, massive golden statue of Trump, super yachts, skyscrapers, bearded belly dancers, a Trump and Netanyahu lying side by side drinking cocktails, a man throwing money into the air. How crass.
I mean, it depends on how you're looking at it, right? I mean,
I suppose so.
yeah, right. Like, I mean, I can give you a perspective on it that is likely where I think the intention is. When Trump comes out and says something like Gaza is America, I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody knows what that means. It's such an absurd level of misdirection that people didn't even know how to respond to it for the first week after he said it. Now there's some talk, right? He starts releasing videos like this that seem totally off base, and are not like at the level of what you would expect from a president. But what is this going to do? This is going to set up a very interesting situation. The paradigm for Gaza has changed. So either the Arab world, led by Saudi and the Gulf states in terms of money, and the rest of the region, need to come up with any idea, hopefully a better idea than that video, for Gaza, and present it to the Americans. Because as of right now, Gaza is America, la-di-da, here's the AI, and what are you guys going to do about it? Hopefully something, because the whole place has been ignored. It's become a complete humanitarian catastrophe. Palestine has effectively ceased to exist. They've bombed everything to high heaven, and there's nobody has any sort of.
So okay, we've got a guy here who stirs it up and disrupts and gets everybody thinking. I understand your answer. Errol, listen to Lee. Lee, former UK ambassador to Kiev. Hi, Lee. How are you doing? If I may call you Lee. Good morning.
Very, very well. Thank you, Nikki.
Yeah. So we're dealing with a man who kicks it up, disrupts it, goes and turns over all the tables like Jesus did, but maybe not so much like Jesus. And it gets everybody thinking. What should Keir Starmer say to him today, and in what tone?
So I was interested listening to Errol just now and talking about Trump looking for results by saying crazy things. And it's worth bearing in mind that the number of results that President Trump got in his first term were rather modest. If we look at what he achieved in Korea, where he set out in 2018 to negotiate with the North Korean dictator over the heads of the South Koreans, and he achieved nothing. 7 years later, North Korea still has nuclear weapons. And the tragic events in Afghanistan were also, of course, partly the result of President Trump negotiating with the Taliban in 2020, which led, of course, 18 months later to the US fleeing Afghanistan. So the record is not all that great. And the weird video we see in Gaza, I'm not sure that emanates from Trump himself, actually. So what is our Prime Minister Keir Starmer going to be saying to President Trump? I think
he's not going to be saying that Gaza video was crass, is he? He's going to be
I'd be very surprised if that's top of his list.
Delicate in what he said. Well, okay, here's the thing. What will he not raise, which some people might say he should?
Well, I think we've seen with President Zelensky, who was very patient and diplomatic with Trump for the first week or so of the new chaotic onslaught of diplomatic initiatives from the White House, but who then cracked when he was accused of having started the war and mentioned President Trump living in a disinformation bubble, which I thought was a pretty accurate description of President Trump. If you look at what he'd been saying all the time about a possible settlement in Ukraine, and Trump responded with a hysterical torrent of abuse. So I think we will see Prime Minister Starmer being extremely cautious in any public criticism of Trump. Like him or loathe him, the president clearly has a very thin skin. He likes to dish it out to other people, but he doesn't like to be criticized. And I'm hoping that the Prime Minister will want to explain to the president why a quick deal of the kind he seems to be trying to negotiate over the heads of the Ukrainians with Russia, and a deal which rewards Russia with territory for launching a really colonialist or imperialist invasion of its neighbor, would be catastrophic, not just for European security, but also for US security, because it would embolden Russia to future violence, to future wars, perhaps in the future, not just against Ukraine, but against other European or Asian countries, or perhaps wider wars. So we really don't want a world where aggressors are rewarded with territory for invading their neighbours.
Did you share any of that analysis or not, Erol, there from the former ambassador?
Well, I shared.
Can't hear you.
I think that it sounds like a European problem. It sounds like
sorry. What's a European problem? I didn't catch the beginning.
Well, the entirety of this going forward. I mean, the idea that America, this is very, very far away from America. At some point, the idea that the American people and the American military are supposed to be forever fighting a war in Europe. I mean, you guys are very rich. You guys have soldiers. You guys have equipment. At some point, why don't you take this burden and go forward, as opposed to always entangling us in your overseas problems? That's the position that you're going to have to impart upon President Trump.
If President Trump
represents his people.
If President Putin, I understand that. If President Putin were to invade Poland, now by Article 5 of NATO, the USA would have to be part of the military response to that.
Of course, but that's not what happened. And what happened here goes back to 2014, and you have neocons like Victoria Nuland and John Bolton, and people who kept pressing and pressing and pressing against the Russian border. Now, does that excuse Vladimir Putin's barbaric attacks? No. But the idea that this type of America is the type of America you're going to get for the rest of the century, I think the last 20 years has turned so many people away from it. The MAGA movement went from a fringe movement to the majority of the American electorate.
New World Order. You said it. Let me, in no particular order, Erol, I'd love you, and likewise Lee Turner, to listen to some of the great British public. In your words, you guys are really rich. I don't know if you are, Richard in Reading, Hassan in Manchester, Sarah in Tunbridge Wells. Where do you go for Richard? We've got Errol there. Erol Morkoç, spokesperson Republicans overseas. You hear what he's saying? It's really valuable to get that perspective. No. What's yours, Richard?
My perspective on what Errol was just loads and loads of lying propaganda on behalf of Trump. Let's look at the basics of what this man is. Okay, he is a liar. You know, I mentioned that he said that he won in a landslide victory. It was the closest election since 1968. So the man doesn't know how to tell the truth, and everything that he is saying and he is doing in America, if you actually watch the people that are going out on the streets, the way that he talks about Canada being the 51st state, what, does he want to become part of the Commonwealth? It's just, I don't get how anybody can believe or try and sit round a negotiating table with a man who's a fraudster. You only have to look at Trump University, which he was done for $20 million for his scam. It's a plethora of lies.
He's still saying he's still saying there was massive electoral fraud, but that's another thing. It says, but his margin this margin of victory was so great that it didn't have the impact that it did last time around. That's his argument. Stay there, Richard. Let's get. I think it's Tim in Helston is there as well. Tim, join us here. Then we'll get Errol's response. And likewise,
good morning.
What should he say to him?
Well, it's very difficult to know how to negotiate with somebody like him. He's obviously quite narcissistic. But my comment is that the US is a major player in the Five Eyes intelligence community, along with obviously ourselves and other countries. How can we trust him not to go off totally left field and disclose some of the intelligence that we're getting? He doesn't seem to realise that I think the comments he makes have severe implications for the rest of the world.
The last time when he met Putin during the last presidency, of course, he was very much criticised for seeming to have a go at American security services. Yeah, I mean, there was that, wasn't there? But you don't trust him to spill the beans, no?
No, I don't trust him at all, and I don't think he cares two hoots. If Biden gets what he wants, which is probably to line his pocket, then I just don't think he gives a damn.
He's just fired the people that are investigating Elon Musk and all the other oligarchs that are top 1% of them.
Guys,
he's just
the other thing.
fired.
The other thing he's done.
We have to work in our interests here. This is the art of the possible. This is what's good for us. And so you have to go in there. You have to be diplomatic. You can't bring any of this stuff up.
Why? Nicky, why? Why do you have to walk into a room with a known fraudster, con man who has molested women, right, and be diplomatic with the guy who you know will shake your hand, and the moment your back is turned, stab it?
Let me give you an answer. It's not my answer.
No, it
because
should be
British jobs are at stake.
And you think that being diplomatic with a fraudster and a liar is going to keep those jobs? You're living in South African.
It's not your only chance.
So, wait, Errol, our only chance.
You have to be diplomatic. Are you crazy? Of course you do. You can't start off negotiations by saying you're a fraudster and a criminal. Everything you do is a lie, and we're here to oppose you. Well, good luck in negotiations, buddy. You're going to lose this negotiation, and the guy who you said is petty and vindictive will take it out on you. Good plan.
Errol,
yes.
He is convicted. He has been convicted 34 times
No,
for
it's a
fraud.
trumped-up charge, and it's going to be overturned.
There you go.
You know,
See,
100% trumped-up charge. They upgraded a misdemeanor to 34 felonies. I urge your viewers to go do any research.
I urge
You also
people.
might get sued if you say
There
he
you go.
molested people, because that ended up not being true. He sued the last
Just a
person.
point.
That's a
Just a
civil
point.
suit, sir. You got to be careful.
Again.
You can't commit slander.
listen.
Wait a minute,
sir.
everybody. Wait a minute.
just lied.
Wait a minute. Wait. Well,
You just
okay.
lied. Whoa.
Oh, come on,
There you
Errol. Errol, you don't have
There
to.
you go.
You don't have to stoop to that.
What a crybaby.
You don't have to. Look,
There you go.
You're a
That's who we're
spokesperson for.
supposed to be
Wait a minute.
diplomatic with.
You're a spokesperson for Republicans overseas. You're
And this
mimicking
person is just
people's
insinuating
voices.
that I'm a spokesperson for a rapist and a liar. So I do take
Yes,
offense
you
at
are.
this man's absolute nonsensical presentation here today.
$90
Absolutely.
million E.J. Carroll was
Yeah, that was a
given.
complete fraud, and that's going to get overturned also in civil
hang
court.
on, you
Good
asked
luck.
me to be careful. You asked me to be careful, right, about calling Trump out for what he is. You have just said that
you
E.J.
should be careful
Carroll-
because slander is a
I
crime,
don't
and,
care.
and this is
E.J.
public airwaves,
Carroll-
buddy.
Hang on, Nikki. He just said that I should be careful because of being diplomatic with Trump. But
You
just
said he
spouted
molested somebody.
out
He's
loud.
never been found
Wait.
criminally
Okay,
guilty of that.
Listen, everybody. I'm going to go to a still small voice of diplomatic calm. Lee Turner, former UK ambassador to Kyiv and author of Lessons in Diplomacy, which I think we could all do with. Politics, Power and Parties. Lee, they do say if you sup with the devil, you need a long spoon. But that is what diplomacy is all about, Lee. And ultimately, it's make America great again, but it's make sure British interests are served, Lee. Ultimately, that's the case. Lee Turner.
I agree with all that. It's very much a question of persuading President Trump, who does like to have his ego stroked, that actually what is in the interests of the US is actually also in the interests of the UK and the rest of Europe. If we look at some of the arguments we've been listening to, I mean, this idea that the US wants to disengage itself from defending Europe, from Errol, I mean, this is not new. We've seen this in the First World War. You remember the US didn't get involved until 1917. We saw it in the Second World War, where the US didn't get involved until the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941. We've seen it before 9/11. The US was trying to detach itself from the Middle Eastern peace process. How well did that go, Errol, for you in all those three conflicts? What we see repeatedly, I was reading a great essay about this on the internet the other day by a US academic institution, saying that really American isolationism goes all the way back to 1796. The idea that we somehow provoked Russia into attacking Ukraine is a standard Moscow trope. It's standard Russian misinformation. What actually happened was that in 2008, Ukraine wanted to join NATO, and the US and UK were in favor of this, but some other countries, particularly France and Germany, said, well, we mustn't provoke Russia. Not a stupid argument, but with hindsight, not provoking Russia didn't go too well. And they invaded Ukraine anyway. So
okay, how would you stroke his ego? You say you need to stroke his ego, and you say people say he's got very thin skin and he's volatile and he's capricious. If I was the Prime Minister and you were my advisor, my ambassador, and I was about to go in and stand on a podium next to Donald Trump, and I said, Lee, Mr. Ambassador, what will I say to him to stroke his ego? Lee, what's your advice?
I would certainly be talking about the way that the UK has consistently stood alongside the US in recent major wars, including the First and Second Iraq wars, and fighting alongside the US in Afghanistan, and our very close security and intelligence relationship, which some of your earlier listeners have been referring to. And I would try to explain that these interests are mutual. It's not that the US is doing us a favor by protecting Europe. It's because the US has always found that defending Europe in the long term is good for US security. And if the US allows Russia to win this war, it will be sacrificing its own long-term credibility as a security operator in the world. And just as it's
He's a Trump whisperer.
chaotic,
He's going to be the Trump whisperer, hasn't he?
its chaotic retreat from Afghanistan probably encouraged Putin to launch his full-scale invasion. And a chaotic withdrawal from Europe will probably encourage China to attack Taiwan.
Okay, Sarah, you want to come in?
Yes, I'd like to first say those two guys who phoned in, the two British people, I'm 100% behind what they said.
Richard and Tim.
Absolutely correct. And this Errol person, he's just admitted that if Starmer doesn't speak to him and kiss the ring, basically, he can be, quote, petty and vindictive, because that's what he is. He's completely
I said that's what you guys would say he would be.
He is petty. Don't. You've had your go. He's petty.
Yeah.
He's malicious. He's
Stupid.
rude. Thank you. He is. He's terribly sick. He knows nothing about history.
Well, he's a very successful guy. He's a great deal maker. You can't say he's stupid.
Cafeteria.
He cannot string a sentence together. But what really gets me is the press.
Yeah.
He decided he'd won the last election, not this one, but the last one. And he's whinged on for 4 years, and everyone, the media has found it all terribly amusing. And then they were all kind of rubbing their hands together with glee because it was going to make loads of money for papers and the social media and what have you. Because to me, this whole horrible business has acted like... we've behaved as though this was the rumble in the jungle with Foreman and Muhammad Ali. I remember that. Yeah. That's fair enough for then, for a boxing match. But this is real life, and I fear this man, and I don't understand why. People used to wonder why the mafia did so well in Sicily.
Oh my God!
I'll tell you why, because people live in fear, and that's what this man does.
Errol, is that just before we, Sarah? Errol, just before we just regroup and listen to the news and the sport, kissing the ring. Mafia, making offers people can't refuse. There's been a bit of that going on. Some acerbic words for your president. Just give me a very short response.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they call him the Teflon Don. They call John Gotti that, too. Donald Trump is, in a lot of ways, a gangster.
John Gotti was a mass murderer, obviously.
Well, he was a mass murderer. Like, John Gotti killed a lot of people. I don't know about a mass murderer. I'm not defending John Gotti, but, like, he didn't kill, like, thousands of people. He was a mobster. Well, the point is the mentality. It's a 1980s New York mentality. So Donald Trump walks and talks and acts like a person from a century gone past. He's the last American aristocrat. And some people, and it's also like it's a little bit tongue in cheek. People, if you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, you think he's a lunatic, like this young lady.
The people of Gaza, when they see these videos, they're laughing at this sardonic tongue in cheek humor.
I think the people of Gaza have been taken advantage of by the entire world order since for the last 75 years. And originally, this was a British situation, by the way, destroying the Ottoman Empire, creating the mandate. So where did the UK and France go the last 75 years? Oh, nowhere. They abrogated their responsibility and dumped it on the US taxpayer. And so now we've set Donald Trump to clean up the mess because we don't exactly want to be the world police anymore.
That's an interesting one to get. But just another quick one, just to throw into the mix, and we will go to the news in just a second. Is he serious about wanting Canada to be the 51st state? Is he serious?
I mean, no, he's serious about the next person coming in and being an actual real president as opposed to this clown we've had to deal with. Like, let's get some trade balance. And also, let's not get, like, this pretty boy prom king guy who's never done anything for the Canadian people. If you look economically.
Pretty boy
Justin Trudeau.
Prom king guy.
Yeah, that's his qualification. I guess all the blackface he wears in college, it didn't matter.
Well, we want to talk about past indiscretions. It is 9:33.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Listen on BBC Sounds.